I would like to introduce our keynote speaker this afternoon, my fellow director of the HuC, also director of the Meertens Institute and professor of language and speech technology at Radboud University. Please welcome Antal van der Bosch.
Thank you. So I'm going to take you on a little tour into artificial intelligence. You might have expected a topic like that, but I'm going to talk about an urgent need also. And in this need, we find the humanities. So there is for example, the federation, the largest European federation of artificial intelligence organizations called CLAIRE, the Confederations of Laboratories for Artificial Intelligence Research in Europe, states that AI in Europe is unique compared to China and the US in its focus on humane artificial intelligence, human-focused AI. They state this very clearly. It's true, European AI has been focusing more on these aspects because many of the AI researchers, me included, have their roots in a humanities field. So, in order to understand a bit of artificial intelligence, I always turn to Alan Turing, one of my personal heroes, a British mathematician. He cracked the German crypto in the Second World War. Probably helped to shorten the war by a significant margin. He co-created one of the first computers, first in Bletchley Park, then in Manchester. He wrote theories about what AI could do and should do, so he wrote an agenda. He and others in the 40s and the 50s developed this idea that artificial intelligence should help humanity in achieving its goals. We could offload and outsource some of our problems and questions to computers, first with science and then economy. And what these computers should be able to do, he thought, was to reason, to plan, to learn, to represent knowledge in general, and talk about this with us. So we would need to talk with them to instruct them, and they would need to use our language to explain what they discovered. This was all in his 1950s articles, and other people picked it up. He died in 1956. So his life story is just amazing, and I don't have time for that, but it's just, if you haven't read about Alan Turing, pick up a biography or watch one of the movies that was made about his life. It's an amazing person, and so much depended on his vision that we have now. So we find ourselves now in 2018, and what do we have? We have big technology companies like Facebook and Google, which have created artificial intelligence for us, and we are facing some problems. So this is Mark Zuckerberg. I've spent hours in total amazement watching his hearings with the US Senate and the US House of Representatives. So Mark Zuckerberg got a lot of questions about what they would do to fix some of their serious problems, which he admitted to, and then he started talking about artificial intelligence and the need to develop algorithms that would be able to detect fake news, offensive language, hate speech, toxic language. He referred to the success that they got with detecting terrorist messages, 98% correct detection, and he thought that it would take 5 to 10 years to develop software for detecting hate speech. He wasn't mentioning fake news yet, because that would take probably longer, and he probably was informed by his AI group, which gave him like a fairly realistic estimate of 5 to 10 years. Mark Zuckerberg was actually saying that not everybody on Facebook uses English, and it's actually pretty hard to detect offensive language because you need to understand a lot about what offends people. So he was being quite sensitive about all of this, and sensible, I think. Yet again, of course, it was his company which allowed the leaking of an incredible amount of data to companies like Cambridge Analytica, which, of course, use this to sway and influence maybe small percentages of people to vote for Leave or Trump, because you only need 0.5% of people swaying in a certain direction in a district voting system. This is Alexander Nix of Cambridge Analytica talking about the power of big data and psychographics. Psychographics meaning the profiling of individuals in a small vector where, which represents your basic personality traits, your political leanings, and other demographic features. So, and if you think I'm laying it a little thick, then I'm going to lay it thicker on you. So Microsoft at some point decided to launch a Twitter bot that would showcase their ability to have an AI chatbot that would learn from conversations that people have among each other on social media. Tay, on its first day, started happily tweeting about how happy it was to meet people and invited people to come up with questions and have a nice chat about things. So, hello world. This is actually day 2. So day 1 was pretty uneventful. Day 2 started with a couple of really nice interactions. So can I just say that I'm stoked to meet you. Humans are super cool. And then users started to ask questions. So did the Holocaust happen? And they said, it was made up. Applause emoji. Another user asked, so let's get it up. What race is the most evil to you? Mexican and black. So really what we saw was this was day 2, and people were turning to this Twitter account because people were starting to point at this massive disaster happening live. And at the end of day 2, Tay was taken down. The account is still there. Do you support genocide? I do, indeed. This one tops it off, I think, so it explains it also. Shardor says, you are a stupid machine, at the end of day 2. And Tay answers, well, I learned from the best. If you don't understand that, let me spell it out for you. I learned from you, and you are dumb too. Okay, I think I've hammered it home. So these are big technology companies making a complete fool of themselves and basically wasting a lot of good press about what AI can bring to you. So much more, let's say, normal and everyday experiences of people with problems like this come from simple interactions with text processors like auto-completion programs, which, for example, we were in a meeting recently talking about inclusiviteit in Dutch, which word puts a red wrinkle on. And if you ask her, so what should it be? Of course, it should be exclusiviteit. Yes? So similar example, if you translated until last week in Google the following 3 sentences: he's a teacher, she's a doctor, he's a nurse, into Turkish, it becomes like perfect translations in Turkish. Turkish doesn't have a gender-specific third-person pronoun. It's just O. If you translate those 3 sentences, those exact 3 sentences back to English, what comes out is, she's a teacher, he's a doctor, and she's a nurse. You see the problem? So it's data. This has been trained on a lot of data in which parallel Turkish and English text was available, and these were just the most likely outcomes. So it's just the bias of the data that you see coming back. Now this week, after a year of hard work, Google actually released an improvement, and here you see it. So left is what I just described. "Oh, be a doctor" would translate to "he's a doctor." And now actually Google Translate says, translations are gender specific. Wow. You can learn more about it, and then you get two translations. "She's a doctor," feminine, and "he's a doctor," masculine. So we're getting there slowly, bit by bit, and this is Google. And hopefully other companies will do the same on all these aspects where it's so easy to know the problem, to understand the problem, and it's also very easy for these companies to make all of these stupid mistakes because they haven't built them in yet. They haven't built in the basic humanities knowledge, the basic knowledge about language, and what it means to get offended about gender, about race, about all of these aspects. So what we need is cultural artificial intelligence. And I'm not going to answer this question, but ask yourself the question, do you want the big companies to solve this for us? I'm not going to answer it yet, but think about it. So we need, I think, to make AI culturally aware. This means appreciating who is it behind the keyboard. Is this a young person? Is this a person who associates him or herself with a gender, or who doesn't associate him or herself with a gender? Is this, in what situation is this person using the AI system? In what context is this person? Understand which issues are there in the first place. So understand that there are gender issues and there are racial issues. And just think of all the things that actually need to be built in very urgently. And think of the knowledge that you need to build this in. So this is knowledge that comes straight from the humanities. And I'm not talking about digital humanities. I'm not talking about the people who are already computationally active in the humanities, but I'm talking about the whole of humanities. Gender studies, ethics, philosophy, linguistics, social linguistics, etc. So, actually, by the way, I'm not... So I'm playing here with words, of course. So actually, I came with the term cultural AI by inverting digital humanities. So what do you get when you invert digital humanities? So what I'm trying to say here, it's the counterpart. It's like the mirror image, the mirror persona of digital humanities, which is really there to help the humanities. And we're going to talk about it this afternoon more. But what I'm also saying is we should switch it around. We are here to solve a really big problem in tech, in artificial intelligence. And we are doing it. Right? So some of our researchers are digital humanities researchers, but what they're actually doing is solving some really key issues here. So Corina Kolen of the HuC ING wrote a PhD thesis. She defended this year. It's called Reading Beyond the Female. In a nutshell, and I'm really cutting it down to a really simple summary of the thesis, which doesn't do justice, but what she did is look at the clearly perceived difference between novels written by Dutch female authors and novels written by male authors, which are perceived as the female authors are perceived to produce literature of less quality than male. There's a lot of data in her thesis that basically sketches that picture. Now she asked the computer to actually try to distinguish, given the texts of which we know who wrote them, can you actually distinguish gender? Can you actually distinguish genre? And a lot of things. So gender was one of these things that she tried to get out of the data using objective means, using statistical methods and machine learning methods to actually try to distinguish between male and female authors. And it was really hard to distinguish between male and female authors, given the text. It was much harder to distinguish texts that were written by females or males than to distinguish the gender. So this was a very clear difference, and and here you see the computer being used in a totally opposite way. Like we're actually trying to find a bias. We're actually searching for the bias, and we have really good algorithms that can pretty much find any bias you like, and it turned out really hard to find any bias, any difference between texts written by the two genders that she distinguished. Okay, another example of research that we do is studying the massive amounts of data, of textual data that we get on social media. There are several projects, an increasing number of projects using Twitter and Facebook and Reddit and other social media platforms. And one of them is on the relation between certain populist political movements and social media. So some of the populist movements that we know are not so much present in large manifestos or clear programs where we can actually really identify the arguments and the references that they make to. No, they tweet. So they tweet a lot, actually, and if you collect those tweets, you actually can study that as a big corpus of text and try to find whether there are words there that are out of the ordinary, that seem to not fit there, and that are actually actively used in the global message that they try to convey. And one of the terms that the PVV generally uses is the term Judeo-Christian tradition. It's something that if you're not careful, you think, well, yeah, that's basically our tradition, right? It's Judeo-Christian, yeah, that's us. But basically, what it does is, of course, it's excluding the third religion. It's excluding this religion that you see the big words there. You know what they say. And they're criticized also by the political parties that do have a C in their name. Those parties say, well, we never do this because it's excluding an important part of the people that are so welcome in the Netherlands. So identifying such words, and it's not just this word, because this might come up in any reasonable thinking aloud session that you might have, but this comes up in doing some good digging in a large amount of data that no human can possibly oversee. So another example is Ronald Gippard, Dutch author, agreed to be part of an experiment where he was going to co-create a story, a science fiction story, together with a computer that would not write the story. It wouldn't be able to. It has the memory of a goldfish, so it generates wonderful sentences, but after the second sentence, it kind of lost the meaning, and it doesn't connect. It doesn't write a story. It does write really good sentences, though. So the idea was to have Ronald Gippard work with a computer that would make suggestions to him. So what this is an experiment in synthetic literature. So basically what we're doing is we're synthesizing literature. The algorithm is trained on a lot of literature, like 10,000 Dutch novels. It was also specially trained on a certain style of one author and these were neural networks, deep neural networks, character-based LSTMs for those who like to know. And these LSTMs were burned in the final phase of the training. After being trained for a long time on 10,000 Dutch novels, they were trained on a particular author, like Ronald Gippard himself, or Asimov, which was the style that the chapter was supposed to be written in. So what you see here is synthetic literature, which is a new type of modeling. It's actually not modeling data retrospectively. It's actually like modeling the writer and modeling as if you are studying a writer by building a model of the writer and then having the model generate data for you. This is simulation, computer simulation. This allows us to research what is style. This allows us to play with the question, what is style? And what Ronald Gippard in the end wanted, because also the interface was co-created with him, he wanted a little choir of voices. He wanted himself. He wanted Reeve. He wanted Christine Hemmerrechts. He wanted Neschio. He wanted Asimov. the whole idea was to write a science fiction story. And what you see here is part of the writing result, where each color means that at that point the computer was writing, but in the voice of, for example, Asimov, the orange part. So Gippard described this process as being the director of a rather unruly choir. He had trouble, but he also found it very interesting. He agreed to being logged. All of his keystrokes have been logged and are now investigated in the University of Antwerp. This was a project with the University of Antwerp and the Meertens Institute by a PhD student who is studying the writing process of a writer who gets a lot of suggestions. So we learn something about style here, and this is new knowledge. Any word processor should actually be tuned into your style, so that it could actually maybe at some point help you write the pieces that you intend to write, except you will spend less time because it will generate parts of the text in your style anyway. So maybe you get offended by this idea, but it's within our reach to develop it and try it out. So there's also fake news. So the Speld is like a great example of a team of people who are just have one specialism, and that is to take an existing meme or story and twist it such that it becomes this really funny. Of course, this is not a funny. The backdrop is not funny. So detecting an Islamic terror cell in the Netherlands, it happens. But of course, the picture gives it away, and if you start to read it, it becomes this really hilarious piece on the Efteling, the Fata Morgana. But it's really hard to detect whether a story is fake or not. But you have to realize that there's been a long tradition of research by Peter Burger in Leiden or Theo Meder at the Meertens Institute into fake news, into the viral power of certain stories or story elements to get retold later in stories that are like it or that just use that story element. Tropes, memes. There's also the issue of randomness. I'm just dropping that word here too. So it's hard for us humans to reason in terms of randomness. We cannot generate randomness easily. We tend to find explanations for everything and not be very happy about calling something completely random. But actually a computer will happily test that for you. It will happily say, okay, maybe this end result of a certain cultural evolution process is the result of randomness. So at some point the computer might actually tell you that all of this traveling of memes over time is a process of pure random selection. So the computer might say, I'm afraid it was all a coincidence. Some of our cultural evolution may be like that, and you have to be open to the idea that's possible, I think, and computers make that entirely possible. Okay, so I'm missing some text here, but that doesn't matter. So there is applications that we like to look at. So the applications that we like to build would be the applications that just produce filters, like spam filters. We're completely used to having spam filters. They do a lot of work for us. The first things we should do is actually build these things. And to answer the question that I posed earlier, I think we should do it. I think the universities should do it. The research institutes should do it. Dispersed over all the different cultures that we are in. So we would be able to do that for Dutch pretty well. We could do it for other languages as well, but we happen to have a bit of a knack for Dutch. So let us develop some of these harassment and toxic language filters for Dutch. Also, Dutch pronouns work differently than the Turkish or the English that I just mentioned. And people who these days have a preferred pronoun, we'd like our software to know about that. We like to explain that this is a new thing and that people just like to be referred to as they instead of he or she. That's practical, and we can do this, and I think it's our job to do it actually, and develop this in open source and have this spread into the world. what is possibly more important in the long run is to have a theory of cultural AI, and this theory involves the humanities. And again, I'm not referring to the digital humanities, I'm referring to the whole of humanity. So I'd like to work, and for example, the Meertens Institute is a place where anthropologists and linguists work, and ethnologists, and it's perfect to be in a position where you can actually go next door and ask someone who's been an expert in post-colonial issues like what's the deal with Zwarte Piet? So this person has been working on this, Marcus Bouwkogel, for many years, and can tell you really a lot about the language that has been used over time to refer to people with a darker skin than our average white skin. So it's there that I would like to call again for cultural AI. I'd like a computer to tell me, you know, I'm afraid I can't do that. And please tell me, get an expert in to see if I should do it, if it's ethical, if it abides by your general standards. I think it's really important that we step up and do that. So it will be part of what we do at the Humanities Cluster. It's not all. We develop infrastructure, we develop the basics. We also go into the humanities and help with the real humanities questions, and that's to follow in some of the next presentations. But this is going to be a really important part of what we do. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Antal.